Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Planning Commission meeting of April 2, 2025. We begin our agendas with a salute to the flag, if you'll join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mr. Villalobos. Do you want to continue on with our TV coverage and roll call?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning to the Commission. Planning Commission hearings are televised live on County Santa Barbara Television, CSB TV Channel 20 at 9 a.m. in the South Coast, Lompoc, San Ynez Valley, San Maria, and Orchid areas. Rebroadcast of Planning Commission hearings are on Fridays at 5 p.m. on CSB TV Channel 20, and today's stream will also be streamed live on the county's website as well as the county's YouTube channel, and will be available for download in a day or two. Moving on to roll call, Commissioner Cooney,
Here.
Commissioner Park,
I'm here.
Commissioner Reed,
Here.
Chair Bradley,
Here.
and we are awaiting Commissioner Martinez.
All right. The agenda status report, Secretary Wilson.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. In regards to the status of our agenda, we have two items on our standard agenda. The first item is the continuance of the Mission Isla Vista Partners Housing Development Project, and then we have a tentative map at the McCalland Ranch in Toro Canyon, and there is a memo and a request to continue that item to May 7th. I recommend, Madam Chair, that when we get to the standard agenda, we take item 2 first and address the continuance, and then take action on that, and then we can move into the Mission Isla Vista Partners project application.
Okay, sounds efficient. All right, so let's move on to the projection report again. Secretary Wilson.
And Madam Chair, our next hearing is on April 9th, and that will be in Santa Maria. There is one item on our consent agenda, which is the Laguna Sanitation and Government Code conformity determination, and then we have the Rancho Luis Equestrian Facility Project. Again, that's next Wednesday in Santa Maria. And then we don't have anything projected for April 30th. And then there's and we can address that next week as far as whether or not we'll keep that hearing or not. But depending on how things go next week, we may not continue. We may not need to take up that cancellation until next week. And then May 7th, we do have 3 items projected at this time. We have an appeal of an ADU. Then it's showing on the projection report the project from today that has a continuance request for May 7th, the tentative parcel map in Toro Canyon, and then long-range planning is going to be presenting senior mobile home park overlay ordinance for the commission to consider and take action on. And then on May 14th, we canceled that hearing. Just as a quick backtracking a little bit, May 7th is going to be in Santa Barbara. May 14th, we canceled it, no hearing on that date, and then May 28th, as of right now, we projected the 5-year capital improvement program to be presented at that time. As of now, we don't have anything projected into June, but I'm sure staff will be adding items to that calendar soon. That concludes the projection report.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Does anyone have any questions for staff on the projection report? Commissioner Park, your light's on. I think it's maybe a holdover, huh? Okay, thank you for that. I may travel in June based on this. Let's be careful. Okay, with that, we begin to take comments from the public for items that are not otherwise on the agenda. We had 2 items on the agenda, so if you want to address the commission about anything else on your mind, this is the time to do that, 3 minutes each. I'm not seeing any slips, and I'm checking with David.
No virtual hands either.
Okay, so with that, we'll close the public comment portion of the agenda and move right along to our planning commissioners' informational reports. Does anybody have anything to report? Commissioner Park.
Yes, as I reported previously, May 14 and 15 is the date for the California Agritourism Summit. There were no details on it when I last reported. They are now available, and registration is possible. I've registered. It will be a day of farm tours, The first day and the second day will be panels and so forth, and all sorts of networking opportunities, government officials and landowners that are interested in that. It's in northern San Diego County.
Thank you.
Also, something near and dear to my heart in my district is that there is now another nesting pair of golden eagles at the Oak Woodland in the middle of the Strauss Wind Energy Project that has had some controversy. That's good news.
Thank you. Welcome, Commissioner Martinez. I'm not seeing any other lights on, so with that, we would move to our approval of the minutes of March 19th, our special hearing. Does anybody want to move for those approvals? Approval?
I'll move.
Commissioner Reed, do we have a second? I didn't see.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Cooney. All in favor? Aye.
One abstention, I believe.
One abstention because Commissioner Martinez was not present. Right. There we go. We got you. Thanks, Mr. Villalobos. Okay, on our agenda, that moves to our director's report and hearing supervisor summary.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, Director Plowman is out of the office today, so we can continue this to next week. I could do a brief overview of what's going to be at the board, or we can wait till next week.
I'm okay waiting. Do people have questions for him? Yeah.
I would just soon hear what's going to be at the board next Tuesday, since our next meeting's after that.
Madam Chair, I can do that real quickly, if you'd like. So looking at the board's calendar, the hearing of April 8th, the item that was heard before the commission, the appeal of Key Site 26, is scheduled for next Tuesday at the board. Then I'm also looking at next week, Long Range Planning's annual work program will be presented to the board. And then just as a matter of interest, the board will be doing budget workshops the week of April 14th. And then as far as the other items that was heard by the Planning Commission that'll be going to the board will be the art tours and home occupation zoning ordinance amendments. That's May 6th. And then I think that just wraps up the items that's going to be before the board from the Planning Commission.
Thank you. Any questions about those? Okay.
Is my lights on?
Yes.
I wanted to make a comment that I'd like you to pass on, Secretary Wilson. I've asked, this will be my fourth time, for when we'll be having a presentation on AB 1693, the WICS bill. And this case we're hearing today, in fact, all the Isla Vista cases are all about 1693. They wouldn't exist without it, or at least our standards in which we're considering it. And I think we're flying a little blind, not having had a briefing on that overall legislation. It's kind of left for us to rely on some very good staff reports like the ones we have here, but we should have something more intentional and directed for us to understand what this legislation is all about that's so important. So I'm going to ask once again, when will we receive a briefing on that? I've heard each time that we will, but I don't see it on the calendar or anything. So don't mean to be a pest, but I do.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, thanks. I will take that notes back, and it looks like we have availability on our projection report to schedule something.
Okay. Maybe that May 28th hearing, when we got the 5-year capital improvement. We're all admin that day. Okay. Or earlier. Okay. With that, I think we're ready to move to the standard agenda, correct?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So are we taking item number 2 first?
Per Secretary Wilson's recommendation, yes, because we have had a request for a continuance for item 2. Let's take that matter up first. I'm sure the commission has read the memo in our packet. They're requesting a continuance to May 7th, correct?
Yes.
So does anyone,
Let me just read it into
yes, please.
Thank you. The following is a hearing on the request of Bradford Sublet property owner to consider case number 20 TPM 1 and to adopt the negative declaration case number 22 NGD 12 and adopt the mitigation and monitoring program contained in the conditions of approval.
Thank you. And we have a memo from staff asking for this to be continued to May 7th. Do we need a staff report? I just don't know that we do, no. But we do need to open the public comment period on that.
So, Madam Chair and Commissioners, Ms. Brown is here can speak to the continuance, and then if you did want to hear anything from the appellant and applicant on the continuance, we can open that up to them and then have public comment on just the continuance, and then bring
Okay.
it back.
Over to staff. Ms. Brown?
Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. The applicant for the McAllen Ranch tentative parcel map has requested a continuance to May 7th, 2025, Planning Commission hearing agenda. The applicant is working with their neighbor to relocate the driveway improvements further from the neighbor's property line, and they need additional time to revise the project plans. Staff is supportive of the continuance request.
Thank you. Any questions for staff on this item? Commissioner Cooney, your light's on.
I'm ready to make the motion.
Okay. Then, based on that report, is there a motion to be made here?
Madam Chair, just public comment.
Oh, that's right.
I
We're
don't-
moving so fast, it's like light speed up here. I'm sorry. Thank you for staff. No questions of staff. We go to opportunity for public comment. Is there anyone online?
No hands up online.
And I don't have any speaker slips for that item. So let's close the public comment period and proceed to commission's deliberation for motion.
Madam Chair, I will move approval of the continuance to the meeting of May 7th with the caution that if the applicants haven't solved their issues, we'd like to know about that as soon as possible.
Second the motion?
Okay, a motion and a second. Do we want to do a roll call? We're gonna do a roll call on that. All right, everybody in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
I saved 5 seconds there. All right. Very good. Okay, then we go back to item number 1, our Mission Isla Vista Partners case. Mr. Villalobos, do you want to read that into the record?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The following is a hearing on the request of Mission Isla Vista Partners LP to consider case numbers 24 DVP 5, case number 24 CDP 21, and to determine the project is exempt from CEQA pursuant to Public Resources Code Section 21159.25.
All right, very good. We want to turn to, actually, this is the point where the commission shares any Brown Act disclosures, any conversations before the hearing. I'm not seeing any light on. I did have a conversation with Pegeen Souter yesterday. She's one of the public members interested in this case, and that's the only public I've spoken to. Did you have anything to add?
Yes, Madam Chair, I did have a telephone conversation Monday of this week from John Poucher, who is one of the owners of an adjacent project in Isla Vista.
All right, very good. Okay, with that,
And I watched the video of the AVR hearing. I don't think that's an ex parte contact.
okay.
Maybe it is. I don't know, but I did it.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because I actually attended the South County BAR meeting, just as a little bit of background for why the commission continued it with the request to the applicant to go to that hearing. So I was there for the beginning part of it and finished the meeting on tape, as did Commissioner Park.
That's one of the reasons I watched it.
Okay. All right, so let's go to staff's presentation.
Okay, good morning, Chair and Commissioners. I'm Kathleen Volpe, and I will be presenting the Mission Isla Vista Partners LP Housing Project Development. The project was initially reviewed by the PC on February 26th. At that hearing, the Commission provided feedback on the architectural design and requested that the applicant voluntarily present their project to the South Board of Architectural Review for comments. and we continued the hearing till today. On March 21st, the applicant presented updated design revisions to SBAR and submitted a final revised project based on SBAR comments to staff on March 25th. Staff has drafted a memo summarizing these project revisions, and we will go over them here. The project revisions include changes to the overall project site for increased privacy, massing and floor plan changes to soften the appearance of the third-story element, which includes a reduction in bedroom density from 48 total bedrooms to 45 total bedrooms, landscaping changes to help screen the development, and material changes to continue to blend the structures in with the surrounding environment. And we will, in the following slides, we will look into that with some more detail. So here we have the revised site plan. Site changes include the removal of the back patio on the behind Building 3. That area is highlighted in yellow. That was originally a concrete back patio space. Similarly, there's been inclusion of an 8-foot masonry wall along the southern portion and western portion of the parcel, which is highlighted here in blue to increase the privacy of the area. And additionally, they increased the planter size in the southern portion, so the southern rear portion of the parcel by the bike racks. It's denoted by that green circle. So based on feedback from the Planning Commission and SBAR, the applicant has revised the third floor massing of the buildings. The original floor plan is on the left, and the revised floor plan is on the right. The original design consists of 16 three-bedroom units for a total of 48 bedrooms. The revised design on the right proposes 13 three-bedroom units and 3 two-bedroom units for a total of 45 bedrooms. Building 3 will house the two-bedroom units on their third floor, and the bedrooms of both designs are highlighted here in yellow. And then also the balconies are highlighted in red, and they have been increased in size on buildings 1 and 2. The bedrooms and the balconies are an attempt to break up the three-story element of the buildings. As you can see on the original design, it's more blocky. When we look at the revised design, they've increased their balconies on the edges, and then they've pulled back the third-story element on building 3 by just having those 2 bedrooms. The next couple of slides, we're going to review the elevations. The original design is above, and the revised design is below. Here in the north elevation, we can see that the color scheme has changed to more grays and soft greens, and vines have been added for the green walls in an attempt to soften and blend the structures with the surrounding environment. Additionally, we can also see that their window proportions have changed. Here in the south elevations, we can take a look at the roof element. So that's become more of a shed roof, as well as you can see the changes to the third-story massing, especially on building 3. You can see it's inset there. These are the east elevations. Again, we see a continued attempt to soften and blend the buildings. Upon SBAR's suggestion, the applicant, their original revised drawings included a first floor element that was a wood base, and that has been changed to a tile base on SBAR's suggestions, which you can see here. And then finally, we'll look at the west elevations. And similarly, it's continuing to soften the nature of the buildings. They have thickened some of their walkway columns, as well as upon SBAR's comments, they've added a metal railing to the walkway. Here you can also see that their landscaping has changed in an attempt to screen, which we'll look at on the next slide. So the applicant has revised landscaping based on feedback. The original design, which is on the left, shows a gap on the southern portion of the parcel, which is now proposed to be more fully screened, and that is incorporated with the masonry wall and again, the removal of the rear patio. The shrub palette has been refined, and this tree species has been changed from predominantly palms to predominantly canopy trees, again, in an attempt to help screen the development. So in summary, the project is eligible for processing under the Housing Accountability Act and SB 330 as it's a multifamily housing development. This act limits review of projects to objective policy and standards that shall be applied to facilitate development at the density permitted on the site and limits the county to no more than 5 hearings on a project. We are currently on hearing number 3 for this project. The Housing Accountability Act projects may only be denied or approved at a lower density if the county makes a written finding supported by a preponderance of evidence on the record that specific adverse impact upon the public health and safety would result, and the mitigation of these adverse impacts is not possible. The project is subject to AB 2097 parking standards and is not required to provide any parking. However, the project design does include 24 parking spaces. The project is consistent with all objective policies in the Santa Barbara County Comprehensive Plan, including the Coastal Land Use Plan, the Goleta Community Plan, and the objective standards in Article 2. And the project is exempt from environmental review pursuant to CEQA Section 21159.25, which is the exemption for residential or mixed-use housing projects. Based on the information and analysis provided in the staff report, staff memorandum, and in this presentation, staff recommends that your commission make the required findings for approval, determine the project is exempt from CEQA, and approve the project subject to the revised conditions of approval included as Attachment B to the staff memorandum. Thank you, and now available for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Volpe. I have a couple questions, but let's start with the other commissioners. Commissioner Park?
I may have different questions throughout the hearing, but one thing I want to ask about right now is the reference to the staff memorandum and your recommended actions. Are you referring simply to the latest memorandum, or are you referring to the staff report? And the reason I'm asking is about the findings. When we last heard this, I pointed out some contradiction I felt were in the findings. It's not your fault. It's kind of the way the law works. And I wonder if those contradictions are still there. I couldn't find any new set of findings. It looks to me like we're relying on the same set of findings that you presented us in the staff report a few weeks ago. Is that correct?
Chair and Commissioners, there was a small change to the findings. I forget which findings specifically, but it was in discussion of the building size. It talks about the net size of the building, and so that's what was changed, but no changes based on comments you had made previously.
Okay, so the revised findings are where in the
Are
packet
part
that
of
we were given?
the revised staff memorandum.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, they're Attachment A. Okay, Commissioner Reed?
I have a question for staff. All these modifications that were performed by applicant on the structure itself, weren't those all voluntary on the part of the applicant?
Chair and Commissioners, correct, yes, they were voluntary changes.
Right, so the Board of Architectural Review, due to the fact it was basically a courtesy hearing, had no ability to require anything. So this was entirely voluntary on part of the applicant, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple questions. On your slides, can we flip to slide 9? The elevations, west elevation? And I know that the applicant will walk us through part of this too, but what was noticeable in the previous set of plans was the stairwells that made it look pretty institutional to me. So where are those now tucked in? Or do you want me to wait until the applicant's presentation?
Chair, we can let the applicant speak to this more fully, but it does, like, this seems to be behind a wall, the green wall on the more left side of the building on the left, and then on the building on the right, the left portion of that building appears,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm seeing a bridge structure now that you're pointing it out. Okay. Well, we'll ask the applicant too, that's fine. And then on slide 10, appreciate the clarification and the circling of different things. On the right, the revised site plan, the small area around the bike in the lower left corner, is that actually smaller or larger than the one on the left, the original? Do we know if, and is it green because it's now synthetic turf, and it wasn't in the first one, or?
Chair, are you speaking to the
The small green square.
Square? Okay.
In the lower left corner of the site plan.
So that is synthetic turf. On both plans, it represents synthetic turf. There is, I believe it has been reduced, a small portion has been reduced.
make
Probably to accommodate for the increase in landscaping, size of trees and things like that have now been incorporated.
Okay. So small changes in the project description, I know you caught on the findings. Was that like a change that's not called out in the findings in terms of the project description, whatever, even if it's a reduction of 60 square feet of that green space, or maybe it's not specified?
Chair Bradley, I don't actually see that little square called out on our project description.
Okay,
So we probably didn't change it. 'cause-
then,
Yeah.
no harm, no foul.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, thank you. I think that's all for my questions, so does anyone else have anything more? No, I did have a request that we have one member of the public that has a very tight timeframe because she's gotten some time off of work and she won't be available until 9:45. So I think we have other members of the public that can start speaking. And I think that's where we go. We go to public comment.
Madam Chair, did you want to have the applicant present?
Oh, hello. I'm moving so fast. Pardon me. Yes, let's have the applicant's presentation. All right. Right now, I just have 1, 2, 3, and I don't know if anyone's only 4, 5, 6 speakers. Thank you, Mr. Roy, for your patience.
No problem. Thank you so much for hearing the project again.
and
My
keep-
name is Lonnie Roy. I am the agent for the property owner.
Thank you. Can I just make sure you include some of the direction and how you responded from the SBAR meeting? 'Cause that was
Yes, yeah.
significant.
So
Thank you.
our slides, we show the original iteration that you have seen, the iteration that was presented to SBAR, and then the current iteration. So you can see all three versions on our slides. And I just want to start out by thanking you for your previous comments. I think the changes to the project made it significantly better. And then I think SBAR also provided some good comments that also made the project better. So as was already noted, so the project went to Planning Commission on February 26. We went to SBAR last month on the 21st, and we are here. So this is our third hearing. So briefly going over the site plan changes that were already presented. SBAR had recommended a sound wall along the rear of the property around that building to help further buffer any noise impacts from the project to the surrounding properties. So an 8-foot-high masonry sound wall has been incorporated into the project around that building 3 at the rear. As was also noted, we did have private patios for those ground floor units at the rear of the property. So that has since been removed, and that is all now a landscape area, and there's been more trees added to that area to help buffer and screen the building from the neighboring properties. Also circled on here are green walls that were added to the project. The green wall along Sueño Road and the green wall that was presented on that west elevation on the left-hand side, which is the stairwell, that was added to the project for SBAR, but all the other green walls around the east, south, and west on the building there, those were added to the building per SBAR comments. And that is correct that that planter area along the south there where the bike lockers are, that was increased, so that did decrease the synthetic turf gathering area slightly. Also going over the floor plan revisions, so we started to erode the third story back on corners to help reduce the massing. So the biggest change was building 3, the rear building. So the top 3 units were reduced by 1 bedroom each, and it was set back a couple feet. And then the corners are set back even more, so that's helping to erode that third story massing. Building 2, it had its southeast corner. There was a bedroom there, so that floor plan was reconfigured. The balcony was expanded to increase the second story massing, decrease the third story massing. Same thing along the street at the northeast corner. The third story massing was eroded away to allow for just the second story massing. So generally, the third story massing is trying to be eroded overall to help soften the architecture and reduce the mass, bulk, and scale. And that is a little bit more clearly articulated on the roof plan. So in addition to pulling away those corners of the buildings in the rear of building 3, we had pulled away the roof plane from the balconies, so that also helped to reduce the visual mass, bulk, and scale of the building. And it's also more in line with the objective design standards that call for some articulation of roof planes when it gets more than 50 feet. So we have gone away from the hipped roofs on building 1 and 2 to a shed roof, more consistent with what we had on building 3 before. But then there's breaks in those planes to help articulate the buildings a little bit more and to break up that massing. So this is the format for all the slides. So the biggest image, so that is the current iteration of the elevation. The bottom left, that is the iteration that was presented to SBAR. And then the bottom right is the iteration that was originally presented to this commission. So the biggest change, well, it was a complete redesign from an architectural standpoint, going to SBAR, incorporating the comments. You know, the original iteration, it was relying heavily off of the mid-century, mid-rise buildings that are present in Isla Vista, and this board articulated that that was not really the architectural direction that would be preferred. So we kind of took a fresh look at the architecture, trying to soften it in terms of colors, and then also just breaking up mass, bulk, and scale. We also tried to, highlight, I guess, the horizontal lines of the architecture more. So that's why you're seeing with the fenestration that the windows have gone more to a horizontal. We have horizontal trim, and then overall we're trying to break up the mass, bulk, and scale slightly more. So the biggest change, and then also looking at the design guidelines, they call for a clear base, middle, and top. So we added a base element to the architecture. So as was noted, the iteration that was presented to SBAR had a vertical wood siding as the base material, which essentially just aligns with the first floor. That has been changed to a tile, essentially more of a masonry type structure, which is more of an honest application where the heavier material would be on the base. And again, we're just adding the horizontal lines. And the main feature on the street elevation was the pop-out that's closest to the street. That was changed to a green wall to help soften that element. And then, so you can see the main entry is there kind of on the right side where you see the addressing number. So that is highlighting the main entry, so that's why you're seeing a change in color there. A comment that was made by SBAR was that those columns seemed weak and they needed to be 12 inches minimum in depth, so that change had been also made to it. And also highlighting here the third story eroding of the building that hadn't happened at the SBAR iteration. So that has since been added, incorporating their comments. To the right, you can see the color material palette there. So the, I'll say accent tile, that is incorporated on key entry points to the architecture. So you can see on the top image, the far right, that is the other stairwell. So the tile is being used to highlight what we are considering kind of entries to it, to the project from the parking lot. So that is considered one of the main entries. So it's trying to passively highlight that element of the architecture. And then when we look to the west elevation, you'll see that incorporated as well. So this is the west elevation. So yes, that green wall element to the left there, that is the stairwell. And then we brought out kind of these wall planes where there's a break between building 1 and 2 to kind of highlight that as an entry. The parking there's no parking in that opening there, so that is the main entry from the parking lot. So, and again, the tile is kind of being used to highlight that fact. Green wall elements were added to building 3 on the west elevation there. And you can also see how the massing is starting to step back on that building 3. And something that was also incorporated on all these elevations to help give a more clear picture is including the landscape. So we'll talk about it more in depth when we get to the landscape plan. But generally, palm trees have been removed with the exception of closer to the building on the interior of the parking lot side, and then on the south elevation of building 3 in that corner courtyard space. But all the other trees were changed to canopy trees. So on the parking lot, they are Melaleuca trees, which are a little bit more transparent, but still vertical in nature. We thought that was appropriate because the massing is set back a little bit further. And then along the buildings where they're closer to the property line, those are Podocarpus trees to have a little bit more solid screening mass. So this is the south building elevation. So the biggest change from SBAR is setting back that third story massing at the top there. So you can see that both the corners are eroded and the overall massing has been set back. Additional landscape screening through the removal of that patio space. And then that also extends to the open space in the southeast corner with Podocarpus screening extending all the way along there. The east elevation, so this is where you see more of those green wall elements that were added to the architecture. These were in the SBAR iteration, but it was only on that first story massing. So now that's been brought up to the second and third story massing. So it's most of those green walls, or more of them, were added along this east elevation. And you can see here how more of that third story massing was kind of eroded away at each end of building 1 and 2. And then also the interior patio space on building 1 there, that the roof line has been pulled back. So each of those kind of helps break up the massing, adds more articulation. It also seemed like the prior elevations, it was kind of hard to read kind of what was going on with the architecture a little bit. So we've added some 3D renderings to kind of easily visualize that. I think what's also kind of good to point out on this is that the original iteration, this was very flat. You know, it had the railings that just popped out. They were, you know, didn't have much to them. And then it was kind of a flat story massing behind it. So we've been able to bring kind of these wall planes out to that kind of colonnade and will form a colonnade. So it adds more articulation on this facade, and it also helps break up that massing. And we've tried to, again, soften it with 2 green wall elements. So this is another street perspective, looking at it from what would be that park space. What's not really incorporated in here is there is actually some pretty robust existing screening along that property line, which would be maintained. So generally that first story, you wouldn't really see it, and maybe partial of the second story. But in addition to that, we have Podocarpus trees to help soften the building. And you can kind of see how the third-story massing has been set back quite a bit on the street elevation. So we also have some vignettes from the interior of the property. So the first one, that would be the main entry, the street vignette. The parking lot one, so there's where we're kind of seeing that's the main entry from the parking lot. So we're highlighting that by bringing out those wall planes, providing that accent tile that you're seeing there. And then the common open space is a conceptual rendering of kind of how that space could be used. And then before we kind of move on from the massing, something that I think should give some consideration is kind of what the zoning is and what kind of the county vision for this is. So although to the west, this is predominantly single-story, single-family homes, this is a multi-family zoned area. Two-story buildings are envisioned, so we're only going one story above that, which previous projects, most recent one, was approved one story above what the base zoning is. So if you look at kind of what the county is envisioning for this area, we don't feel it's going that far beyond what's actually allowed. And we're sending back most of the massing on the park side where it isn't impacting buildings. So moving on to the landscape, as has kind of been discussed throughout, the original plan had predominantly palm trees all around the perimeter. So generally those have been removed in the iteration that was presented to SBAR. It had the podocarpus trees around the perimeter of the buildings, had the melaleuca trees in the parking lot. The screening along that south was still, I would say, sparser than what's been presented. So by removing those patios, increasing the patio or increasing the planter space at the bike lockers, we were able to add those taller screening tree elements to help soften that elevation. There's a little bit of gap in that southeast corner. The neighbor there has a tree that they were concerned about potential overcrowding of our improvements onto that tree. So that's been kind of left open a little bit there. The podocarpus trees have been pushed a little bit north. And then we did add more king palm trees pretty densely against building 2 there to help screen it kind of more interior into the property. As was noted, the plant palette's been refined a little bit. So this is kind of a sampling of what the plant material is. The plants were found to be appropriate from SBAR, so there weren't really changes from that. Regarding parking, the recently put out their parking analysis. So this is kind of taking some of those exhibits, noting where the site plan is on those. The street isn't the most impacted street in Isla Vista, but it is impacted. And I'll kind of just move on to the next slide because there's all this talk about AB 2097. And although the project is within that zone, we never looked at this project as that. We always looked at it as a state density bonus project, and we applied the state density bonus parking requirements, which are noted on there. And there have been previous projects in Isla Vista that utilize state density bonus parking ratios that have been approved, built, and constructed. So we don't feel like we're asking, we don't feel like we're pushing the envelope on this. You know, we could have proposed under state density bonus 22 units, no parking, you know, as high as we wanted. We feel like we're trying to strike a balance between what the neighborhood is envisioned to be and what's kind of appropriate for it. And we do want to thank the Community Services District. They provided a letter with a couple of suggestions to also help to alleviate parking. And so we will be incorporating some of those into the project. The project was already providing bike parking, so providing 100 parking spaces, so 2.22 per bedroom. There's a suggestion of transit vouchers, and I think part of that's in education. Using school IDs, the tenant base likely is going to be UCSB students, they can already utilize local bus transit for free with their bus pass during school session. So I think it's educating them on that, providing kind of bus route schedules, and then also providing vouchers for when there is a gap in that service for them. So that can be and will be incorporated into the project. There were suggestions for car share. So we are open to providing one space. It's highlighted in orange there for a car share vehicle if any of these services want to locate one there. Although in the owner's experience with operating properties, they did have those, a Zipcar on properties at some point, and after about a year or two, they didn't really see them getting used anymore. And what they're seeing on their properties more is the use of rideshare apps, so Uber, Lyft, also delivery services like DoorDash, and that seems to be a little bit more prevalent in the area. So we feel like dedicating probably 2 spaces specifically for that would be kind of a better use. So that way there's always dedicated open spaces for those vehicles to park, so they're not double parking in the street or double parking in the parking lot, so that those spaces are available. And that could be kind of somewhat flexible if that becomes more of a need, and that will help reduce the need for tenants to have their own vehicles. And part of that would be car-free marketing of these units, which we can definitely do, and we definitely will. There was a suggestion to prohibit car ownership in the leases. Our understanding is legally we cannot do that. We can prohibit vehicles that they own from being parked on the property, which we will because there's only going to be a certain number of spaces per each unit, and we'll have those license plates and kind of police that. But outside the property, we don't believe we can police car ownership. And then other factors, I think, is kind of how this project and other housing projects in Isla Vista are kind of looked at. I feel like there is this perception that this housing project and other housing projects are inducing demand, but we don't really think that is. We think the population in Isla Vista is kind of set. It's there primarily driven by UCSB. And currently everyone's overcrowding into the number of units that are there. So we see these projects more as redistributing that existing population. So we don't think it necessarily drives more demand, drives more cars. It just distributes that population and distributes those vehicles. So that's how we believe this project will actually operate once it's hopefully constructed. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Roy. I know I have several questions, but let's start with the other commissioners. Commissioner Reed?
Sure. Yeah, first, I'd like to, thank you for, since, as I mentioned before, these modifications were voluntary and I think quite substantial. I'm kind of struck by the plan that they occurred, by the idea that they occurred so rapidly between the hearings. But one of the things I noticed in one of your original renderings, your original building 3 showed a solar array above the roof. Now, is that an element of this? Is that concealed by the new roof line, or is there going to be a parapet wall or something?
It isn't concealed from the roof line because of the low sloped roof nature. If you're seeing the building from the street, you likely won't see those solar panels. Plus, they're going to be mounted pretty close to the roof. So they're more or less, I would say, kind of integrated into it. Or if you're at a pedestrian level at a certain relatively close proximity, you just won't see those solar arrays.
Okay. Another element in your renderings, all the original renderings of the original plan, the buildings are just sitting there naked, no landscaping. Although in this one, you make great use of screening with various plantings and trees and things. With respect to these green walls, are they of a trellis type construction, or what's the method to create those green walls?
Yeah, so the 2 green walls around the parking lot, the landscape plan currently is proposing a creeping fig, so that is self-clinging, so that will just grow on the wall and kind of form around the windows. The detailing on the buildings, it would be a trellis. The exact detailing of that hasn't been determined. The architect is showing it currently as kind of a wire system that the vines would grow on. But I would say that is subject to change as we kind of get further into the detailing the architecture.
Okay, and just also, I noticed all the renderings, they, as I said, rely pretty heavily on trees to soften the look of the building. Although, looking at your plant palette, I don't know that the renderings there, they actually look like they could be Melaleuca or Podocarpus, one issue, a minor one. But I noticed that since the building is, what, 36 feet high? And these trees shown, some of them are in excess of that, 40 feet. What sort of specimen trees are you planning on planting there? Because I know a Podocarpus, even a 24-inch square, could take decades to get to be that height.
Yeah, I think they would probably, I mean, 36-inch box would be a good size to plant them at and have them have some height to begin with. I think that also helps the form because Podocarpus can grow in many different forms. It's often not really grown in the tree form anymore. So you get a larger container from the nursery that's already pruned up in a tree form. It encourages it to grow that way. And with consistent application of water, it can grow 24 inches a year if you give it that water.
I know I had a couple of very large Podocarpus I detested on a former property I lived in, which were trees. So I know they can get there.
Yeah.
It's just, it may take a while.
Yeah.
One other question, this is more with respect to parking. If we go to page 16 of your presentation, and you touched upon public transit vouchers, the car share. With respect to the public transit vouchers, you said they can be provided. I'd be happier if you said will be provided.
They will be provided.
Okay, and then similarly, car share, ride share, willing to reserve. I'd rather it was will reserve. Give it a good trial, then if it doesn't work out, don't do it, because willing doesn't really have a lot of substance.
Yeah, that's more a factor of the companies that operate those car share vehicles and if they locate vehicles here or not. I know it's been said that there's Zipcar on UCSB campus. When we were looking in the short time frame, we had to kind of research that. On Zipcar's website, we couldn't actually find that vehicle there when we typed in the address and said, try to find a vehicle. So at this point, we're not 100% sure that that vehicle or they would be willing to opt to locate more vehicles here. So those discussions with those companies kind of needs to be done to see if they have those vehicles and want to locate those vehicles here.
I would just hope that, you will, with respect to all of those commitments and the car-free marketing, those things, you'd make a really, what do I say, have a strong level of commitment and really pursue those actively, because I know we have a great number of, public commenters who feel they're going to be adversely affected, and we have little power to do anything. So I'd hope on your part you could, or the, applicant would really aggressively pursue those alternatives to help mitigate any kind of thing. We would appreciate their commitment on that.
Oh, yeah, are you done with your questions? Okay, I'm going to take a moment here because we do have a member of the public that has a half-hour time constraint. So I'm just going to call one member of the public, and then we'll continue on with commissioner questions. So Pegeen Souter, I believe she's in the room. Thank you. Yeah. And we'll ask for 3 minutes for public
Yes,
comment.
I got it. Dear Madam Chair and Commissioners, thank you for this opportunity to speak. Well, I appreciate the applicant's willingness to make changes, and there have been some really good changes made. Thank you. It is still not enough to reduce the major impacts this development is going to have on our community. According to my own research to date, there are now 21 proposed developments in Isla Vista, 9 large ones, 3 to 7 stories, 3 new single-family homes with an ADU, 9 additional ADUs. There have also been at least 6 ADUs built in the last 2 years, bringing our total to 27 new projects. This will create 419 additional bedrooms, The number of on-site parking spaces that I can find is only 120. Coastal ordinance requires 2 parking spaces per bedroom for a total of 856 spaces, but 2 of these developments are intended to be single occupancy. The total for these is 84 rooms. So by removing the 42 and then the 120 on-site, that'll give us 634 additional cars in Isla Vista, and thus worsen parking congestion and worsen coastal access by creating overwhelming competition for coastal access parking. The project must undergo CEQA environmental review process. After the 257 parking spaces that are removed for daylighting and the future public works, there's only going to be 2,515 spaces available on the street. The studies show we are already over 100% capacity. The addition of these 634 cars is a 25% increase, and the 257 that we're losing is a 10% decrease. I counted the spaces on 6700 Block Sueño yesterday. There were 82, and all of them were full, including folks in red zones and blocking driveways. And this was at 3. So we could see up to 60 residents from this project alone looking for a spot on the street. Around the corner, there are 2 proposed developments, 930 and 936 Camino del Sur, 52 rooms and no on-site parking. With the possibility of 104 additional cars, where are the residents going to park? The CSD's parking survey puts parking congestion on that block at more than 100%. Parking congestion has demonstrably compromised first responder access, and parked cars routinely jeopardize public safety by parking in red zones, including sightlines, parking on sidewalks, in front of fire hydrants, and in handicap zones. The Planning Commission cannot make findings for the project approval because the project will be detrimental to the comfort, convenience, general welfare, health, and safety of the neighborhood, and be incompatible with the surrounding area. Furthermore, the Planning Commission lacks evidence to make findings of compatibility with the Goleta Community Plan, Local Coastal Plan, and the Coastal Zoning Ordinance. I thank you for your time and your service. I thank my neighbors for the great letters and for showing up and being so supportive. And I really thank you for letting me talk.
Thank you, Ms. Sauter. Okay, with that, I know that there are other members of the public here, but we're going to resume with our questions from the commission to the applicant, Commissioner Park.
Good morning, Mr. Roy. I also welcome the aesthetic changes, as I call them, but I don't think that's the main issue today. I think the main issue today is planning issues, and that's what I want to get on. But on the aesthetics, I want to be careful to clarify something. Even though I prefer the aesthetics of the alternative to the former proposal, just for where it's located, I don't want to imply that I'm insulting the architect. I think that they were both interesting proposals. Probably the first one would fit more in more rural areas where I live, but so that's just a judgment thing. But to the planning issues, which is what we're really here for today, I note that you've gone from 16 apartments to 13 and 48 bedrooms to 45. And I didn't see any explanation of what the motivation was, the reason for that, or the consequences. I'm not criticizing it. I'm just curious if you would explain.
Yeah, so those 3 bedrooms were removed on the south elevation of Building 3, and that was mostly to set back that 3rd-story massing. So that was the reason for it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I have a couple questions, and it's going to involve some referral to your slides, right? Can we get his presentation back up on the screen? Great, and go to slide 8. I'm sorry, 6. Okay, first of all, tell us what a green wall is. I have a feeling, but please explain.
Essentially, how it's applied to this project is a wall where there will be vines.
Okay. If I was in a Trivial Pursuit game, I would have won the round, right? Okay, and then on this elevation, the top of the image, you have a sign here. So that's going to be apartment complex. Do we have any idea how big that has to be? Because it is going to bum out the green wall there. And I know we just adopted a new sign ordinance, so I'm just getting a scale of what that cutout is going to be. Do you have an idea?
At this point, it hasn't been designed. I would honestly say the owner typically doesn't put signs on stuff, so it's very likely there won't be a sign.
Okay.
But if there is a sign, that's where it would be.
Okay, that's fine, and we have a sign ordinance that takes care of it. On your slide, hang on. This is the creativity in your presentation. Page 10. We have this guy exercising. He will be exercising right in the middle of a line of bikes. If I go to your slide 15, right?
In a line of bikes?
So slide 13, actually on your landscaping plan, it shows it, right? You have Mr. Exercising Guy next to the green space, right?
No, so that one is on the street, so it would be looking at the property from the west.
Oh, okay. So then I'm confused about where that green planter is.
So it's the
Oh,
top
in the top
right
corner.
corner
Got it.
there.
Okay. Okay, well then he'll be free to exercise as depicted. And then, hang on, very helpful information about your owner's experience with Zipcar things. I'll wait till deliberations to suggest something about that, but I appreciate that feedback. The law that you stated about how you cannot prohibit car ownership, your owner has a lot of rental units, I'm aware of that, but there are leasing provisions, there are pricing mechanisms that you can build into leases that charge more for someone who needs a car versus less for the people that don't, and that's how I think he already leases quite a few units in Isla Vista. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so their understanding is, they can only essentially, I'll use the term police, vehicles that are actually on the property. So yes, each unit will get 1 to 2 spaces. So they will be required to register which vehicles they will be parking on site but as part of their lease. And then if a vehicle is parked there that isn't on that lease, then the vehicle is subject to being towed. But if they have a personal vehicle and they never bring it on the property, is their understanding they have no right under the lease to tell them they can't have a vehicle. So if someone chooses to have a car and never bring it on site, they can't control that.
I guess my point was, if I'm going to lease a 2-bedroom space and I am going to have my car on that property, I could be required to pay $400 more per month than the unit that isn't going to be allocated a space. You have that discretion, correct?
Correct.
And I believe, based on conversations I had in the street, literally, with some people that had lived in this owner's other complexes, that is a common way to do.
It is common in IV due to the parking demand. That parking is an extra cost as part of the lease. Yeah, that is common practice out there.
That's good. That's good. That's what everybody's going to have to do in Isla Vista, because it's going to have to be more to have a car. Okay, I think that I didn't have any other questions, actually. So, Commissioner Park?
I left out something. I wanted to thank you for your comments, candid comments about the impact of 2097. I think we see it differently where this goes, but I think we would agree it really, under the circumstances, this case doesn't impact our determination. And I'll address that further in deliberations. But thank you for bringing it up.
Did we have any other questions from the commission? Yes, Commissioner Cooney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had one question in my mind as you were going through the landscape changes. Did you or anyone, the architect, calculate the water demand of the project? It just seems like a whole bunch of new green is going to either be watered or left to die. And that concerns me, because then a lot of the work you're doing right now would be canceled out. It just would ruin a good plan. So do we need to have something in our approval or if it is approved to indicate that the plants have to be maintained for the duration of their lives?
That's typically a common condition of approval. I believe it's probably in the county ordinances as well, that they have to be maintained, so I don't think that needs to be added. Regarding the water use, the project is required to comply with the state's model water ordinance, and so I believe all of the plant materials are low water use. The podocarpus, I think, will show as moderate, but the city of Santa Barbara actually has a modified list, and they do list that as low. Typically, you will water most plants a little bit more heavily for the first 2 years to help establish them, and then after that, you can pull off. It just kind of affects the vigor of the plants. If you stop watering them, typically a lot of plants, they will actually survive. These plants are low water use, so they would survive if you reduce the water significantly. They just probably wouldn't grow that much. So the intention here is obviously to keep a regular watering schedule on the trees to allow them to grow.
But the use of water, the maintenance of the trees, you're not exempt from that by the state
No, we would have to,
legislation.
we would have to continually maintain them.
Madam Chair, I'd be happy to weigh in on this if
Please.
you don't mind. So the project will be subject to WELO, and so when they submit their permit applications through the building department or division, they'll need to provide calculations for water use that will demonstrate that they're consistent with the state requirements for water efficiency landscape ordinance. So that will cover that. And then specifically for the site plan, the plans include the landscaping and the landscape plan. So if anything were to die, they would be on the hook through permit compliance to maintain that landscaping. So they would have to replant and then maintain that.
Thank you, Mr. Doug.
Did you have anything else? Okay. I actually had one follow-up question on that. So I know your condition of approval 11 has water conservation and landscaping in the past. Maybe it's not allowed for these density bonus cases. There was usually a requirement for a landscape bond. Is that not allowed in these density bonus things, or has WELO like gobbled that up and taken care of it?
Madam Chair, I'm not familiar with whether or not it's allowed or not. However, whether or not we require a bond depends from project to project. But in the past, we've collected a lot of bonds, and the process is very arduous. And I can't think of a time for any project since I've been here where we've actually collected a bond. And so we try not to collect bonds unless we really have a big project where we think this really would come into play.
Okay, and your point was that as part of the project description, so they're obligated to install it and maintain it in perpetuity.
That's correct. And
Okay.
we have permit compliance for this project. And so that they will be, if there is any issue with the site plan, we will be enforcing that.
Okay. One more question, as long as Mr. Roy's up there, I'm sorry. How the stairwells work, because it's so elegantly crafted in your elevations, can you explain that to me? If I was entering this on Cervantes, where do I find my stairwells? And I don't know if you want to do it on a site plan, or it actually would help if you did it on the elevation, because you did such a great job of camouflaging them. Honestly. Where am I going?
I'm just going to walk up there because the laser pointer doesn't really work on the screen.
Yeah. Okay, can we do that? We don't have a pointer? Yeah. Thank you.
So this is Sueño Road. So the project is improving with a new, I believe it's an 8-foot wide sidewalk. So driveways here. So there are 2 pedestrian entries from the street. One is on the west side of the building, which I would say is kind of screened by these shrubs, but it is here and goes into this green wall structure. So the first stairwell, you can see a little bit of the handrail here.
Got it.
Is right there. So the stairwell is right when you come off Sueño. And then there's a walkway that's on the PL side, and that goes around the building. But that'd be more that's more direct to the bike parking, so it's more or less kind of the bike route
Right.
is intended along there. The pedestrian is intended here. And then this colonnade or this walkway goes all the way around the building here, and the other stairwell is on the far back corner here. So there's a wide kind of walkway opening from the parking lot that's kind of aligned with the drive aisle that goes right there. So then that would be the second stairwell access.
Thank you. Okay, honestly, I don't have any other questions, I promise. Okay, let's continue on then with public comment. And the speaker slips that I have in front of me are Jay Freeman, to be followed by Janet Stitch, and ask that you state your name for the record and also limit your comments to 3 minutes each.
Hello, my name is Jay Freeman. I'm a resident of Isla Vista, as well as currently an elected official serving on the Isla Vista Community Services District and the Local Agency Information Commission. I'll be splitting my comments today, beginning with commentary representing myself, but will transition and finish with a short list serving in my official capacity on the Isla Vista Community Services District Parking Committee. The main thing I want to focus on today is that Isla Vista is incredibly dense. In my 25 years living in the area, it has been striking and doesn't have many entrances or exits. There has been a lot of discussion over the years trying to mitigate impacts from large numbers of cars going through Goleta on the way to Isla Vista, with lawsuits, settlements, and contracts all in play attempting to mitigate real harms. All meanwhile, multiple local agencies have been examining the safety of streets in Isla Vista with respect to accidents between cars and both pedestrians and bicycles due to our tragic congestion. Additionally, a comprehensive parking study recently done by the Isla Vista Community Service District shows over 100% utilization due to illegal parking in red zones, encroaching on driveways and intersections, as well as even in front of fire hydrants or blocking right-of-way. This is not your normal "we have nowhere to park" problem. This is a public safety hazard due to a lack of enforcement of existing regulation, a historic lack of permit programs, and underbuilt infrastructure in both bike lanes and sidewalks. Importantly for this project, there have been efforts by the county to improve the situation, but it is almost comical how the maps of improvements they are working on are in areas of Isla Vista exclusively not near today's new development. In fact, both myself and the staff of the Isla Vista Community Service District have, for years, pointed at the intersections and north-south streets at either side of this block of Sueño as being where efforts needed to be directed, but due to both inertia and expense, these areas are going to be left as is. It is thereby my contention that it should be possible to put all of this background together to show, even with respect to the quantifiable sub-requirement, a specific adverse impact upon the public health or safety to the area, which should allow the Planning Commission to require mitigations from the project developers to avoid these harms, even with their usage of various remedy and bonus laws, as they must attempt to do so unless they can prove it would render the project unaffordable, which honestly seems unlikely to me with their mix of affordances and typical bedroom density. To wit, and putting on my official hat as the director of the Isla Vista Community Service District, empowered to officially represent the district as a member of the Parking Committee today at our meeting last night on these various projects, I will list off some potential mitigations and actions we requested, which we would hope you either try to negotiate with the developer, apparently some of which have already been seriously considered, but which should get locked into their proposal. Please do push for will rather than can or willing to, or recommend to come from the county, whether as part of existing developer impact fees or just as part of other IV projects being undertaken by the county. And very quickly, fund IVC to parking program, fund sidewalk infrastructure for transit connectivity, operate a private shuttle or fund the wave, provide bus and Amtrak vouchers, host car share programs on-site parking, build secure covered bicycle parking, include lease clauses prohibiting car ownership, market the project to potential tenants as car-free. Thank you for your time, and please do not just pass this on without taking a second look for potential specific adverse harms. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jay Stitch. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Freeman, I think Commissioner Park has a
He doesn't
question.
need to come back to the podium. I want to make an ex-parte disclosure that I forgot to make, and you reminded me, you being a member of the Isla Vista Community Services District, that you folks sent a letter out, I think, Friday. On receipt of that letter, I called Mr. Brand, who I think, Spencer Brand, who wrote the letter, and corrected the statement by telephone that this is a builder's remedy project. I know that had been stated actually last week by one of our planning commission members, but it's not. This is not a builder's remedy project, and that was the sum and substance of our conversation. But I did have that conversation, and I forgot to report that earlier.
Thank you. My comments were all on bonus law, so.
Thank you. Okay, Janet Stitch, followed by Jim Souter. I'm sorry.
Do I have a clicker? Oh, you will. Now, it was the other presentation, the first presentation.
We had Ms. Souter as number 1.
No, I mean, as far as my pictures went. I'm sorry.
So this is the order that.
Okay, all right, well, we'll go with that. I'm sorry. Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name is Janet Stitch, and I live in Isla Vista, California. First of all, I'd just like to say two quick things. Number one, if you build it, they will come. And number two, a picture's worth 1,000 words. You did get my letter regarding this project, and now I'd like to show you just a few pictures to complement my points on safety and parking. But first, a quick anecdote. A year and a half ago, one of my family members awoke with a very serious medical condition. I knew I had to get him to the emergency room and admitted. We got out to the car. I looked down the driveway. My driveway was 100% blocked with the car that had parallel parked in front of it. I had to go to my neighbor Sue's house, borrow her car to get my husband to the emergency room for admission. So the amazing thing about this is just how far I had to look for an example of how parking affects the safety and well-being of the people who live in Isla Vista. One recent Sunday morning on March 16th, I thought it would be a good idea to go and take some pictures of parking in Isla Vista. This was for another presentation I was going to do. It wasn't scientific. It was just a block to block, looking at various pictures. So I'll go through these with you. This is a picture. Once again, the cars cannot egress in case of an emergency. In IV, you do not know if you know the owner of that car. Next, please. Also, you'll see many examples of parking in the red around a corner. When pedestrians and motorists come into the intersection, they actually have to enter the intersection to see if there's any oncoming traffic. Next. Fire hydrant, I took 3 of these. This was just a quick little spin around IV. Next, please. Thank you. Next. This is just half of the pictures that I took. Next, please.
You have 30 seconds remaining.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. %, many of them are 100% in the red, not just a tiny little fraction. So
I'm sorry, you're out of time. You chose to use it with the photos, so yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to say we are already at the cumulative.
Understood. Thank you. Did I have that right, or did I cut her off early, David? I thought she'd used it, yeah. Okay. All right, our next speaker is John Sutar, followed by John Warner. Again, 3 minutes, and please mind your time.
All right. A quick note, I was at the Santa Barbara Architectural Review, and there was a clear warning to the applicant that the trees, the podocarpus and the melaleuca, would be at the side of the buildings on the east and west side, did not have enough room to grow, and podocarpus and melaleucas generally rip up sidewalks and foundations. So that was real quick. All right. Regarding the proposed development of 6737 Sueño, we understand that the state bonus density law provides waivers and concessions for projects that include additional increments of affordable housing. We believe that any bonus density waivers and/or concessions must be permitted in a manner consistent with the California Coastal Act, including the local coastal plan and coastal zoning ordinance. In other words, the county must harmonize requirements of the California Coastal Act and the local coastal plan and coastal zoning ordinance with the Housing Accountability Act. To date, the county has not exercised its discretion to comply with this requirement, and as a result has overlooked the significant contribution the project will add to Isla Vista's extreme parking conditions, jeopardizing public health, safety, and exacerbating the unavailability of coastal access parking for non-residents seeking to enjoy Isla Vista beaches as mandated by the California Coastal Act. All right. Anyway, I have pictures. These are in general like fire hydrants. If you could just roll through them. That's just cars parked in the middle of the street, you know, blocking sidewalks in front of our neighbors, in front of another driveway, in front of hydrants. Yeah, in front of hydrants. Just all the way around corners, you know, sticking out so you can't see down the streets, can't make the corners. And in fact, when I drove out to work yesterday, I drove past 3 cars and, oh, this house, can you go back for a sec? This house, I put that on there because it has just been permitted for a 3-bedroom ADU, and that's the parking at the house already. And then the next one, you can see the sign up there is oceanfront, $750 triples, you know. So this is the overcrowding issue that we have for our residents. But anyway, I drove to work, drove past 3 reds, a car parked so far out in El Colegio that the bus couldn't make the corner, and people were trying to back up on the street to allow the bus to just make the corner. All right, thank you very much. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak, and yes.
Thank you, Mr. Sauter. Okay, our next
Quick
speaker.
question for
Oh,
this
I'm sorry,
speaker.
please. Mr. Park?
Your pictures showed in some places there were sidewalks and other places there weren't sidewalks. Can you comment on what that, shall we call it, excess of parking, how that impacts the availability to navigate the sidewalks?
Well, you basically can't. I mean, I have to walk around cars all the time on any street, anywhere there's a sidewalk. And basically, what we're missing is the north-south routes to the bus stops that this project is being, you know, based on, is these mass transit, stops. But there aren't sidewalks going that way. And even if there were a sidewalk, people just park on them. It's another driveway, so to speak. And if you were to widen the sidewalks that they're talking about doing on Del Playa, you would just have a car parked parallel on it. I mean, that's just what happens in IV.
Thank you, Mr. Sutter. Okay, our next speaker is John Warner, to be followed by Spencer Brandt. And again, please state your name for the record, and you've got 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is John Warner. Thank you for your time. I believe the parking situation has been pretty well covered, but the deal is it's a health and safety issue because the kids don't use the sidewalks. I've been a property owner out there for 20 years and a hands-on guy working there a lot. The kids like to walk and talk in a group, so they tend to move along on the streets, not line up on the sidewalks. And the cars invariably are parking on the apron of the driveway, and it pushes everybody out in the street. They don't come back on the sidewalks. I mean, I've seen it for years after the sidewalks were put in. Thought they were a great idea initially, didn't work. The other thing, I believe you've all gotten my letter about the health and safety of traffic. Also, one of the units I had a 2-story unit built next to it. And every winter, the shadow from the 2-story unit blocks the light hitting the bedrooms on one side of this unit. They invariably come up with mold development, and kids are complaining about their health, and it's a problem to keep the mold down from lack of sunlight on the side of the house. And that's a very clear health and safety issue. With a 2-story structure. A 3-story structure makes it even worse, even though the illustrations of all these buildings presented today look as though they're done out in a field in the middle of Bakersfield in the San Joaquin Valley. There are houses all around. It's a densely populated area, as you well know. And then I have a section or a question. Should affordable housing units in the project simply be smaller versions of the market units, basically costing the tenant about the same price per square foot as a market unit? I don't have the numbers to really look at that, but I think you should consider that as an issue. That's about it. The mold issue is a real issue, and nobody else is talking about it but me, but I've lived through it for many, many years. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I have a question. So do you own some rental property yourself? Is that what I'm discerning?
Say again?
Do you own rental properties yourself? You actually are a landlord out
Yeah,
there?
I own, I have 4 units out there.
Okay, all right, thank you. And how long have you had those?
Varying, 13 years on one and 20 on another.
Okay, all right, helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Spencer Brandt.
Good morning, Chair Bradley and Commissioners. My name is Spencer Brandt, and I serve on the Isla Vista Community Services District Board of Directors, though I'm speaking in my personal capacity today. You should have received a letter that I submitted last Thursday, Commissioner Park, reference also in my personal capacity. I want to say at the outset, I understand the need for rental housing in our community. I was a part of a group that met with tenants that were getting evicted from the sweeps, the largest mass eviction in California. Many of them were longtime families that had lived in Isla Vista for many, many years. And their circumstances are a direct result, I understand, of the housing crisis. To address that, in this project and others, I believe that what we need is real solutions to the concerns that you've heard about today relating to parking and transportation. The Community Services District is collaborating with UC Santa Barbara and the county to reduce car dependency in Isla Vista, but we still lack the resources to properly implement the parking compliance program. This project has become a focal point for the longstanding frustrations that residents have regarding inadequate parking enforcement, or simply not even just inadequate, just really not at all. You've heard about the blocked driveways, limited emergency vehicle access, and you've seen the photos today. Effective parking management and reducing car dependency is critical to achieving the goals that our community strives to meet of being an environmental and a sustainability leader. Yesterday, as you've heard, the IVCSD board endorsed the transportation demand management strategies that are being considered in this project, and I want to thank the applicant for considering those voluntarily to try to make the project work better. One suggestion that I would have regards to rideshare, which is something that I think there's been a space assigned to in this project, is the Santa Barbara MTD Transit District is piloting the WAVE, which is a rideshare type program run by public transit. The Community Services District has been working with them to site sort of the home base for the WAVE at our community center. And this will be much cheaper for residents than the average rideshare. I believe the cost of a one-way fare is $3. And so that is something that I would encourage the applicant to look into as well for options for rideshare through the public transportation and car sharing services. So I thank you for listening to our neighbors' concerns and hope that these TDM mitigation measures are helpful, not just for this project, but for future ones in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we have one question for you just stay there. Commissioner Reed.
Yeah, Mr. Brandt, thank you for your input and your comments. I think they're very valuable. But when I first got a copy of your letter, I was a bit confused. Maybe you can clarify it. It says you write to share your personal concerns about parking, yet you sent it on Community Services District letterhead. I found that a bit confusing. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so I would liken it to if a county supervisor were to send a letter about a project on their own letterhead. I'm an elected official, as are others in this room, that represent our own opinions in addition to those that are of our institution.
But on the official letterhead.
That's my letterhead.
Okay,
As
so
many
it's
want
your
it.
own personal letterhead, not
Correct.
theirs? But you have the indicia of the Community Services District on the top. I don't want to discount your comment. I found it a bit confusing. And I think your comments and your recommendations are valuable, but your letter's dated March 28th. Didn't your board members say you met just a day or two ago with respect to this? And the recommendations he said came up in the board meeting exactly corresponded to these?
So they were largely in alignment with those recommendations. There were
Okay.
2 additional ones, one regarding investment in local businesses. As you've heard at the last commission meeting, one of the things that surveys show will get residents out of cars is to have local groceries and services near them. The second one that came up was something that we have spoken actually with your staff about, which is trying to get to parents to encourage them to look at the true cost of vehicle ownership. And so it was those 2 in addition to some of what was mentioned in my letter.
Okay, well, thank you. I know you're faced with a monumental problem there, and probably no one has more expertise on it than your group. So I don't want to discount that. I just was a bit confused. And don't get me wrong, I really sympathize. I live in Santa Maria. Take a drive around there. Anything and anything you saw, you can see there on a daily basis. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Brandt. I'm going to take a quick break, about 10 minutes for a body break, and then we'll move into deliberations. Correct? What? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, please, online. I didn't know we had a speaker online. Before we break, let's do that.
We have, our next speaker will be Julia Barbosa.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, my name is Julia Barbosa, and I'm a resident of Isla Vista. I would like to once again register my opposition to the proposed construction at 6737 Sueño Road. Adding density of this magnitude to an area of mostly single-family homes not only sets a bad precedent that would make it profitable for developers to tear down single-family homes in the western areas of Isla Vista and plop down multiplexes with minimal setback, but it adds significant and immediate impact to the streets of Isla Vista. We've been told by other county officials that a project could be denied based on safety concerns, and I believe all the evidence presented by the local residents and the parking study done by the IVCSD more than proves that increasing overpopulation without mitigation is a serious health and safety concern. These photos of illegally and egregiously parked cars that I submitted to the files were all taken 2 days ago. The first 5 were taken around lunchtime on my walk from the downtown area, and the second half were taken in the early evening on Del Playa Drive. As you can see in the photo, where 2 staggered cars are blocking the sidewalk with a fire hydrant squeezed in there, and the young women walking on the street, the sidewalks are inaccessible. We're also told that bus access relieves developers from having to provide parking. On the other hand, the people who do rely on public transportation often cannot disembark safely due to cars parked in off-loading zones. When I recently rode bicycles with my son to attend a meeting with county representatives to discuss this very issue, we had to put ourselves nearly in the middle of the intersection with steady traffic more than once because it is impossible to properly see when all red zone corners are blocked by illegally parked cars. In the argument of accessibility, we are also told that coastal access cannot be considered impeded even if there's a lack of parking because the beaches could be accessed in other ways. In the case of Isla Vista, pedestrian access is also compromised, especially for the most vulnerable populations, the families with young children, the elderly with walking aids, who are endangered by the road hazards. As it currently stands, all the hypothetical mitigating strategies for this complex issue that involve multiple stakeholders have no funding for implementation. On the other hand, the impact of this project and similar ones in Isla Vista are both quantifiable and undeniable and will be felt immediately upon completion. We are repetitive in our claims because we are repetitively overwhelmed by the situation in our community. We live with it every day. Isla Vista is a community with a history of fatal tragedies that tend to originate from or be exacerbated by overcrowding. A project of this scope would further strain our limited resources and infrastructure and immeasurably increases the risk that our community is facing. I ask you, Commissioners, to please deny this project in its current proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so let's proceed to our 10-minute break. Thank you. And we are going to recommence the meeting of April 2nd of the Santa Barbara County Planning Commission. We are at the point of Planning Commission deliberations, and I definitely have some high views and some smaller views, but I'd like to hear from the rest of the commission first before I outline those things. So does anybody want to share their thoughts on this case? Commissioner Park.
I'll always go, but I'd hope to hear from you. It's in your district, but I can understand why you want to go.
Well, okay.
If you feel comfortable stating what you want to cover, I think it would be good to go first.
Okay.
Even though it's a little, usually the chair goes last, but whatever you feel comfortable doing.
No, let me start. That's fine. I really appreciate all the community's work on this, and I also really appreciate staff's patience with this. Again, we are in a situation with these housing laws where the county is having to change the way it's done its land use planning for many decades. Many decades. I've expressed before how difficult it is for me as a planner and as a representative. However, the third compliment I want to give is to the applicant. We asked him, out of the kindness of his heart, to go to SBAR, and I was at SBAR. They were a little confused about it, but they were productive. And I think the applicant in this situation took the plans and really made some significant improvements, significant architecturally, maybe not so significant to some of the neighborhood because they'd prefer to see something less dense altogether. But I think that the applicant did a good job in revising the case. And given the shadow of our density bonus programs and laws and the Housing Accountability Act and all that stuff, we are with a project that I think can be supported. I want to address what the public has said repeatedly about the parking situation in Isla Vista. No question, everybody knows that. That's one of the reasons why the commission had the presentation by Mr. Branton and Mr. Aboud a couple of meetings ago to talk about what the parking saturation level is and what the parking survey is and programmatic collaboration between the Isla Vista Community Services District and UCSB and the County of Santa Barbara. So that trio of governments is aware of it also, and they're trying to start some programs, including enforcement of parking in the red zones, which is what the public has brought up today repeatedly. I also understand the opinion that the parking problems and blocking of driveways, I can't disagree with you that that's a super concern, but we asked about this, and I'm going to ask County Council to remind us again. To me, that was a convincing argument when we heard this the first time, that it was a public health and safety concern, and unless it's public health and safety, we can't really lean back on general plan consistency or size, design, and scale the way we would normally do with a typical development plan or CUP or tract map or any discretionary action. So I'm going to ask County Council to remind us about their interpretation of that law.
Sure. Chair Bridley and Commission, so I think the point that you're getting to is whether the project would have a specific adverse impact on the public health or safety. And just to be clear, the definition of a specific adverse impact is a significant, quantifiable, direct, and unavoidable impact based on objective, identified written public health or safety standards, policies, or conditions as they existed on the date the application was deemed complete.
I know this can be discussed probably at length, but right now I'm going to go with County Council's advice and not consider the parking and blocking of driveways and everything in Isla Vista to be meeting that standard. That's your advice, right?
Madam Chair and Commissioners, ultimately it's up to the board or the commission whether to make those findings in applying this standard to this project.
Okay, thank you. The last thing I want to comment on is maybe it's been spurred by the Isla Vista district's presentation, but I spent a long time in my career doing traffic management programs, transportation demand management, traffic systems management, all of that stuff, which is trying to change behavior by virtue of parking management and congestion pricing and all those things that are now very important in Isla Vista. And so I appreciate the applicant's willingness to do all that. I believe strongly that we can't be too prescriptive about those things, just like the adaptive management plan, that Commissioner Park was so good at developing with the Strauss Wind Energy Project. Each site is going to have different demands, different tenants, different owners, different options for pricing as a way to get people to not have a car or to only walk or bike. So I am in favor of having some sort of standard condition on these things that talks about having the applicant implement transportation demand management strategies to encourage non-vehicular travel, including the following menu, but not make it a must-be do that, because it's going to have to adjust. For example, in this case, if the owner initially rents out to half students and half workers, that's a different menu than if in 2 years it becomes a very desirable place for retired couples to live. So they have to remain lithe in how that adjusts, and it should be through their standard leases. So those are my only thoughts about the case. I'm definitely able to support it with my sympathy and understanding of the neighbors. But again, our hands are tied. I hate using that that phrase, but they are literally tied. We don't have a lot of options to apply typical policy or rules the way we would normally have done. We're up until about 4 years ago. So given the laws that we have now and the policies that we have now on the books that have adjusted our view of things, I think to provide more housing, this is the goal of the state and the county also. I think that this is a good project. And again, thank the applicant for making those adjustments. I think it's improved. So those are my thoughts. Commissioner Park or Commissioner Reed?
Anybody who's ever watched a planning commission hearing all the way through realizes we sometimes have disagreements here. And so I beg to differ. I'm going to explain why. This project is in Commissioner Bridley's district. It used to be in my district for years and years and years. And I first started going out to Isla Vista 55 years ago. So I kind of know Isla Vista. I like Isla Vista a lot. I've told people if I didn't have so darn many animals, I'd probably live in Isla Vista. And where probably all my dogs would fit in, but not all the horses and sheep. I don't know about sheep in Isla Vista, but we'll see. First of all, we've got to not overthink this and look at our findings. And our findings fairly clearly include the finding that the project will not be detrimental to the health, safety, comfort, convenience, and general welfare of the neighborhood, and will not be incompatible with the surrounding area. We have to make that finding. I'm not sabotaging anybody here because I brought this up at the prior hearing, and I specifically asked staff, do we still make this finding? How does it accord with the Housing Accountability Act? And staff came back. They could have revised the findings. They didn't. They do things with intentionality. They know what they're doing, and they presented the same finding. So we have to make that finding. I can't make that finding, not in a million years. It is not compatible with the surrounding area. It's incompatible with the surrounding area. And that's the first thing when I watched the various comments at the ABR hearing or BAR hearing that Commissioner Bridley went to, that the architects all said it's not compatible with the surrounding area. Now, one comment that was made, including by Commissioner Bridley at that hearing, was that there's no discretion. There is discretion. We have limited discretion because of the Housing Accountability Act. It doesn't mean we have no discretion. I think I react a little differently when I hear county council state what the law is. That's not giving advice. That's stating what the law is. It's not telling us how we should vote, and we shouldn't take it that way. I, too, want to throw out a compliment, and it's to staff. I asked Mr. Villalobos to print out for me today. Government Code 65589.5. If you don't know what that is, you should write it down, everybody, including the Planning Commission, because that's where the Housing Accountability Act is. Okay? It used to be about a page long, but then after AB 1693, it's now 16 pages long. Okay? And it includes all these different standards that we have to refer to if we decide to exercise our discretion that we do still have. And I want to comment or compliment Ms. Volpe because her summary of this in the staff report's very accurate, and that's pretty hard to do with 16 pages. And we had the same thing from Ms. Richardson, who did a very good job of describing it. But as Mr. Richardson said, we do have discretion. One thing I want to do is I referred to when Mr. Roy was up there on the what I would call the witness stand, his comment that 2097 doesn't really apply, and I agree. That's AB 2097 on parking, and it limits our ability very clearly to require parking for a project. But I'm going to vote no on the project, and it doesn't say you can't vote no on a project, just says you can't condition it to add those things. So 2097 does not specifically apply here if we're refusing the project. Now, getting to the Housing Accountability Act, it says we have to have a specific adverse impact that we refer to. I'm referring to the same impact that everybody here has talked about. We're not talking about the architecture of the building. The architecture of the building has a new green wall. It's prettier. It's nicer. I think there were great concessions by Mr. Roy and his clients, and I wouldn't even call them concessions because it improves it. I think it improves the value of it and ultimately be a good thing. But they talk about a green wall. I'm going to use another color, red. It's a red herring, okay? None of these people that spoke today, none of the letters talked about the architectural issues. I know our commission kind of enjoys acting like a BAR, but that's not our issue here. Our issue here is the parking impact, and that's what everybody spoke to. That's a specific impact, parking. This government code section says it has to be adverse upon the public health or safety. Okay, we've got an area where people can't walk up and down the street without worrying about cars shooting out of here and there, and they can't see anything because of the cars parked everywhere. Interesting, I heard the reference to kids several times, and I think what people are referring to is in a somewhat condescending way to the young adults that are students there. You know what? I remember this from when I was there. There's actually a lot of kids in Isla Vista. They go to the Isla Vista school, a lot of families that live there. I spend hours every week walking with my 2-year-old granddaughter, and I can't imagine doing it in Isla Vista without being very concerned for safety. So that's a specific adverse impact upon the public health or safety. It's supposed to mean a significant, quantifiable, direct, and unavoidable impact. It is significant because we're going from what would normally require 90 spaces with this many bedrooms to 25, I believe it is, and now we've got commissioners talking about let's have zip cars, let's have Uber parking lots, and we'll reduce it even further from the 25. I hope you talk to your tenants before you do that, Mr. Roy. But is it quantifiable? Yes, because we've gone from what would normally require 90 spaces to 25. That's a quantifiable difference. You can subtract 25 from 90. It's numbers. And is it direct? Yes, it's significant. Is it unavoidable? Because yes, it is. You're going to have these many people parking their cars. They're going to dump them out all on the streets. They're going to put them somewhere. You saw a study that a week ago that lasted 2 or 3 hours in its presentation that mentioned all this, and all their graphics were up there. So I think we meet all of the requirements of Government Code 65589.5, the Housing Accountability Act, to make the decision if we want that we can deny this project. And that's where I'm going, because I can do it under this government code section. I've just spelled out the reasons why. And also, I cannot make the finding that's been presented to us by staff that we have to make to approve this project. Thank you.
Commissioner Reed?
there's two of us on this commission who I think, can greatly sympathize with the neighbors of this project since being from Santa Maria, Santa Maria and Isla Vista are probably the two most negatively impacted places in the county by excess parking. So I, for one, can deeply appreciate the impacts that has on the neighborhoods. Similarly, I understand the effects of the various legislation we're faced with that comes from Sacramento that dictates housing. I mean, we've also heard some moving stories of individual impacts, particularly the impact on someone who needed to secure medical therapy at night and was precluded from doing so by someone who had parked in their driveway. But what I'm wrestling with are do these stories really rise to the level required, as stated in some of the comments from County Council, for us to feel comfortable denying. In my mind, while impactful, they don't really rise above the level of anecdotal. So I am troubled. I'm a little distressed in the fact that even though what we have heard is impactful and just, I don't feel it really rises to a level sufficient for me to feel comfortable in denying the project. I think I'm also distressed in the fact that I think this whole situation, not just for this project, for the whole of Isla Vista, demands more participation and action from UC Santa Barbara, their administration, as well as, it's also the product of our state legislature, which, while they're bound to increase availability of housing, so often neglects the needs of the neighbors. I mean, Santa Maria, we're plagued with a proliferation of ADUs that we suffer from. You're plagued with the proliferation of the need for students to have places to live along with your regular long-term residents and where to park all the vehicles. And thus far, we don't have an equitable solution. So I'm distressed with the fact I'd love to have a reason to deny, but what I'm seeing doesn't rise to that level. So I will reluctantly vote to support the project.
Thank you, Commissioner Reed. Commissioner Martinez?
Yes, thank you. And let me start by saying that I too am going to reluctantly support this project. I think and I'm not saying that to dispose of the efforts of this project, but the impacts of this parking situation. I have a different take in regards to what's happening here, in regards to what has been dictated to us by our legislature, especially in regards to really dismissing or prohibiting the effects of the parking that is going to have an impact on this neighborhood. I believe it will have an impact. I don't think there's any denying that, but I think there already exists an impact on this neighborhood, and that neighborhood, as the pictures show, there's already a problem that's been existing here for some period of time. And I can't get over that in my mind in regards to, there has to be some alleviation, but this project is not the means to alleviate it. I think Commissioner Reed just said it better. It's the whole of Isla Vista in which we could to do this. From a personal aspect, I've seen and I've experienced in regards to what happens when the ADUs happen. I saw that. I see what happens when people just dismiss the whole parking laws of what's happening in parking in the red. I'm just amazed at the lack of enforcement, but that's my social comment. I think I've also have struggled with the fact that here we were presented with this whole study, and I'm still kind of in a quandary as to whether I can even consider that study because it's really not in front of me at this issue right here. They're not saying, okay, here's this part of the objections to these things, or we have to address these things. I mean, admittedly, the applicant has provided a part of it as part of their presentation. I mean, they're the ones who kind of put it in there, well, not kind of, but they did. But again, my instance of the restrictions on the parking is from the legislature. In other words, restrictions that should be applying to this applicant's project has been taken away from us as a part of the legislative act. And that's my understanding, and that's why I so reluctantly say, I use that word reluctant. I think this is an improvement upon the living facilities that are there, which I've also heard about, but those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Martinez. Commissioner Cooney?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. It's just coincidence that I'm last. It doesn't mean that anything I say is right. And I always value the comments and feelings of the commissioners with whom I've worked for years and years and have a great amount of confidence. That's not to mention staff, which is highly qualified. Without mentioning names, I think everybody who's spoken on behalf of staff at today's hearing and at the previous hearing on this matter has our confidence and to an extent trust and have recommended that this project be approved. There were significant changes between our two meetings on this project. And I thought about that early this morning when I woke up. And like the rest of us, I admire the changes that were made to the structures and were significant and would make a difference if the project were approved. But it also seemed to me that what has been done is put lipstick on a pig. And the problem created by this project and others that are in the pipeline are not going to be ameliorated simply by green walls and changing the plant palette and other things recommended by our very competent Board of Architectural Review. There are two things that I can't get by that are different than what Commissioner Park raised in our findings. I believe that adverse impacts are not mitigated to the maximum extent feasible. We approach some other ideas in terms of relieving the real evil that the project adds to, and that was not committed to by the applicant. And so we were left with what the applicant was willing to do through their visit and encounter with the Board of Architectural Review. But I think instead of saying, yes, go ahead, our hands are tied, we should say, we'll take another hearing and see if the applicant can convince us that they have made the maximum effort to ameliorate the very serious traffic health and safety problems. Reading from paragraph 2 of the findings, the project is exempt from environmental review pursuant to Public Resources Code section 21159.25, which exempts residential or mixed-use housing projects in urbanized areas. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about there are no environmental sensitive habitat areas on the project site. The project will not have significant impacts related to transportation, noise, air quality, greenhouse gas emissions, or water quality. I think our record today shows that the project will, in fact, cause those adverse impacts, and they could be dealt with more effectively and more completely than was demonstrated today, despite the applicant's good faith. So I'm going to join Commissioner Park in dissenting from the approval.
Okay, thank you. Really good perspectives from all sides. I could go with Commissioner Park's position too. The challenge I have is that, the state has given us a way to approve projects and actually mandated it. The state density bonus law, by the way, it started out with ADUs. I appreciate what Commissioner Reed just said because I live on the mesa of Santa Barbara and there hasn't been probably half of the homes are now have ADUs, if not ADUs and a guest house. So single-family zoning is out of there as far as the state is concerned. It started with ADUs. That's making all of our single-family districts duplex zoning across the state, and that's by right. I mean, now we even have agencies that have pre-approved plans. So you just click on the ADU you're going to put in what used to be a backyard with no parking required. So it started there 6 years ago. And every year, the state has gotten more and more aggressive. In terms of today's action with the state density bonus law, that's allowing people to come through with just a consistency with objective design standards, which even takes away discretion from our South County Board of Architectural Review, another way to limit what we can do. I agree the way the findings are written that we seemingly have discretion on this, but I'm following what staff's recommendation is in terms of those findings that we've historically relied on for 45 years in the context of these new state mandates with objective design standards and state density bonus law and Housing Accountability Act and all kinds of legislation. I just hope Sacramento stops. So with that, to address some of the comments that we've heard today, I'm hoping that staff maybe has something that we can add to the conditions in terms of the transportation management options, because that's going to be pretty important for my motion to include.
Yeah, Madam Chair, so we've added text to, it's the middle paragraph on this page. Yes, Dave, if we could just increase the size of that. In the project description, there's strike out and underline. And so this underlined middle paragraph is what has been added. Okay. And I will go ahead and read it. So public transit information, resources, and vouchers will be provided to all project tenants unless the tenants already have a transit voucher through their school ID. The applicant will evaluate the option to provide a car share vehicle, such as Zipcar, on site. And the applicant will also voluntarily market the housing complex as a public transit accessible site.
Okay. I'd like to work with staff on the next version of this because I think we can make it a little more robust, but that's fine given that we are on hearing 3 of this case that has a limit of 5. So with those changes to, this is condition 1 in the conditions of approval, right? So this is amending
Correct.
the
This is the project description.
the project description, which is found on page B1, condition 1, correct? I would move to approve the project with these changes to attachment B1.
Madam Chair, we were just hoping to get the applicant on the record, just acknowledging that they're willing to.
That's right. Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Roy.
I acknowledge and agree with that addition to the project description.
Thank you. Okay, well, that's my motion to make the required findings for approval of the project as specified in attachment A of the staff memorandum, including sequent findings, determine the project is exempt from CEQA pursuant to CEQA Section 21159.25, included as Attachment C of the staff report, and approve the project case number 24 DVP 0005 and 24 CDP 00021, subject to the revised conditions as included in Attachment B of the staff memorandum, as shown on the screen.
And is revised today.
And as revised today. Okay, because all of those, that motion was related to material in our former staff report as well as today's, right? Okay. So there's the motion.
I'll second it.
Mr. Martinez. Okay. Why don't we do a roll call vote?
Commissioner Cooney,
No.
Commissioner Park,
No.
Commissioner Reed,
Yes.
Commissioner Martinez,
Yes.
Chair Bradley.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-2.
All right, thank you. With that, that concludes our meeting of April 2, and we adjourn to next Wednesday
I'd like to make a
in Santa
quick,
Maria. Yeah.
quick request to staff. On your staff reports, if you've got a code section that's particularly applicable, and you do on this one, albeit it's 16 pages long, it's just as important, if not more important, than some of the other appendices, and I just included as an appendix. I think that the text of the staff report was excellent in summarizing it, but just have something where you can readily refer to, having it in the packet would really be useful. Thank you.